Okay. I'm going to ask everybody as you're entering here today, if you wouldn't mind popping into the chat where you're located. Where are you calling in from today? This is great. This is just wonderful. We're going to let this run just for a second or two. If you're just popping in with us, we're doing a little bit of a warm up here and letting everyone know where you're calling in from today. Yeah, go ahead. There's folks in there that are seeing some old friends in the chat. Go ahead. If you're seeing someone you haven't seen for a while, go ahead and send them a shout out there. That's great. We've got a big crowd planned here for today, and I'm just so excited. So letting that run for a little bit here, even if you're joining us, I'm seeing people coming in. What we're doing is adding to the chat where you're calling in from today. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, good afternoon, maybe it's good evening to everyone here, depending on where you may be in this world of ours. I know we have folks joining us from Cameroon, Africa, Slovenia, and even the Philippines. We also have folks clear across the US. And that's who we are. The METM program, we're delivered through our global WSU's global campus. And that's the one great thing that sets us apart is the diversity that we have in the classroom. But welcome to today's webinar, Mastering the Transition from the Technical Role to the Inspiring Leader. We are excited to have you join us here today for this discussion. We're going to be talking about building a successful and a resilient career in today's professional landscape. I'm sure that probably resonates with everybody here. My name's Dr. Kay Bachman. I am one of the faculty members of the Washington State University Master of Engineering and Technology program. I'm going to make that a whole lot easier and just say METM from here on out. So the METM program at WSU is designed for working professionals. And these are the folks looking to enhance their leadership, strategic decision-making, and technical management skills. Our designed curriculum integrates business and engineering concepts, and we're really equipping engineers, scientists, and technical professionals with those tools to manage really complex projects. We want you to be able to lead dynamic and innovative teams, all while advancing your career. So whether you're looking to refine your expertise in, say, project management, maybe it's operations, risk analysis, or leadership, METM provides the education and the flexibility needed to succeed in today's fast-changing industries. So our program includes a suite of professional certifications, and we deliver all of our classes live, just like we're doing right here with our faculty members via Zoom online meetings. So our program is really designed for working professionals. I want you to keep that in mind. So today, here's our agenda. Each of our panelists will tell their story of their own transition to a leadership role. They will be sharing their experiences, lessons learned, leadership insights, and how to prepare for a leadership role. please, please, please post your questions in the chat session and I'll try to get to them as I can. What we want for this session is for it to be highly interactive. So get ready to engage, ask your questions, and gain some actionable insights from these three industry leaders who have successfully navigated these journeys. So now let me introduce our three esteemed leaders here with us today. Up first, John Pricco. John is a seasoned aerospace and manufacturing executive with decades long of experience in operations, supply chain, and strategic leadership. John has held key leadership positions at Boeing, where he played a pivotal role in driving operational excellence and innovation. His expertise in complex systems, large-scale manufacturing makes him a valuable resource for professionals looking to navigate industry shifts and career growth. John has also held the position of adjunct faculty with us with the ETM program and was instrumental in developing the leadership course that we offer. Next, Dave Hyam. Dave is the former vice president of metals at Boeing Fabrication, where he was responsible for the strategic and operations of Boeing's metal production across North America and Europe. Over his career, he has led initiatives in engineering, operations, supply chain, and additive manufacturing, shaping the future of aerospace production. Now retired, Dave continues to give back through mentoring, board service, and leadership development. His journey will offer you valuable lessons for professional development, leadership, and adapting to industry transformations. Next, Jen Ramos. Jen is leader, board member, and former Boeing executive with expertise in global manufacturing, supply chain, infrastructure, and sustainability. After an impressive 34-year career at Boeing, now she serves as lead director at Beneficial State Bank, faculty at World 50, and a mentor in various global initiatives. I'd like to point out that Jen was recognized as one of the most influential Filipina leaders in the world. Jen brings invaluable perspectives on leadership, resilience, and shaping a future-focused career. Also, Jen is on the WSU Board of Regents, go Cougs, and recently led the successful search for the new WSU president, Dr. Elizabeth Cantwell. So welcome, John, Dave, and Jen. Thank you all for joining us here today. So let's jump right in. John, why don't you get us started? Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Great, thanks, Kay, and thanks for that introduction. Wow, it sounded more impressive than it felt when we were doing it, I think. So welcome, everybody, and good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll share a little bit about kind of my journey and some thoughts on leadership, and then we should have plenty of time for questions afterwards. So how did I start out? Well, I think it started with demonstrated performance in the jobs that I had. And then others noticed my leadership skills, my people skills, put me in charge of some informal teams, and saw that, you know, maybe I had something going on. So I was also part of the Expo program at Boeing, which was a program that identified young employees that looked like they had the potential to move up into management. So that was pretty much it. This was back in the 80s. There was not a lot of training ahead of time. And so my supervisor one day came to me and said, hey, throw your sports coat on. We need to go see the director of engineering. So we marched over there and saw a guy named Bob Davis. And we walked in and talking to Bob, and he says, well, John, you have a new job. You are now the supervisor of the group. Didn't ask me if I wanted to do it. No interview. It was like, there you go, you're starting. So that was all of the training and notification that I had, which was very interesting back then. It wasn't until after I went into management that I took Boeing offered a class in the basics of supervision, and that was very helpful. And then went on to more education over time. I did get my executive MBA from that other school in the state, University of Washington. And then a lot of learning on the job through different roles. So I was kind of a baptism by fire. And if we get a chance, we can share some of those kind of difficult lessons starting out. But a few thoughts first on moving into leadership. I think it's important that you recognize that it's not just the next step in your career, it's a decision to make a career change. You're moving from a technical role to a leadership role, and it really is a different job. In the past, they would tap the best performer in the group to be the manager, maybe the best technical person. No longer the case anymore. You need to have the people skills, you need to have the leadership skills to go with that. You're moving from a technical focus to a people focus, from actually doing the work yourself, even though you'll still do some of it, to leading the people that are doing the work. And I learned early on, you really have to rely on those experts in your group, even if you know how to do it. There's a lot more value in letting them do it the way that they would do it, an acceptable way, of course, but not necessarily the way that you would do it. And then they own that work and they learn from it. So really important to delegate and let go as you move into leadership. So it is a conscious decision to take that career change. And one of the ways that I would encourage people to think about it is not think about what job you want, but think about what you like to do. Do you like sitting down and working through a challenging technical problem? Or do you like interacting with people, leading teams, helping inspire others? So figure out what those things you like to do are, and then match the job to it. If it's more on the people side of it, management might be the right thing. So a couple thoughts in mind with how you might prepare, and then I'll turn it over to Dave. The first thing is you got to perform your job, and you've got to be really good at it and learn by doing. And then there's the education portion of it. Formal education like the ETM program or an MBA, those kind of things can be very helpful. But there's also lots of informal opportunities. This webinar, for example, or other seminars, reading some of the key leadership books. There's lots of things you can do to help expand your knowledge. I also encourage people to not only gain depth in the area that they work, but you need to get some breadth across the company. Try new things. Don't be afraid to move to new assignments and try new opportunities. And in doing so, learn about your downstream customers within the company, your upstream suppliers, your peers, even your boss's job. The more you can understand those aspects, the more you're going to understand the bigger picture of the company, and the more you're going to be ready to take on a leadership role. You can also find a mentor whose leadership style you respect and see if they're willing to help mentor you. The other thing that I found very helpful was observe other leaders. Look at what they do that looks like it's good, effective methods and techniques, and try to emulate some of that stuff. Add that to your toolkit. But probably equally as important is look at what they do that maybe isn't good, and make sure you're not doing that stuff. So you can learn by observing. Again, I talked about taking on new opportunities. I've always said action cures fear. If you're afraid of trying something new, try it. You're probably more ready than you think you are. But don't be afraid to take on special assignments or special teams. All these things are going to help develop your skills and give you some of the visibility that can be helpful for your career. So I think I'll stop there so I don't take up all the time. And turn it back to you, Kay, or over to Dave.
Okay. Well, thank you, John. I'm agreeing with Anwar, who's put in the chat. This is a gold mine of information. So thank you, John, very much. Yes, next we're going to move on to Dave.
Oh, well, thanks, Kay, and thanks, John. I always enjoy listening to you, and I had the great fortune of working with John and Jen for many, many years. I'm Dave Hyam. I was a mechanical engineer, and I guess I still am a mechanical engineer. And I was working at Boeing, I started out as what we would call a liaison engineer. This job has you out on the factory floor dealing with problems and issues in production. And it was a great place to start for me personally to learn kind of how the production system works and so on. But much like John, after about 5 years of various roles doing that, I had a similar visit. Mine was a little bit, I think, more flexible. I was my senior manager asked me, I think you'd make a good first line manager, and this was on a Friday, and we'd sure like to just put you in that job, and you can think about it over the weekend. So I'll be back here Monday, and you need to give me an answer. So I thought about it over the weekend and, just to describe kind of how I rationalize that in my mind, I was thinking, gee, I put a lot of effort into getting my engineering degree. And I felt good about the work I was doing. I thought, gee, I'm making a difference. I can solve these problems. And, we're having a better result with our production and so on. But then I really reflected on, what is it that really gives me joy in the work I do, And as much as I love solving problems, and I really did, I thought, gee, I think it'd be even more fun and maybe more impactful if I could create an environment where, this group of 20 engineers like me could be successful and solve even more of the issues we face, and I think I could make a bigger difference. So that was my rationale for why I said yes. And it's interesting, that first job I had 20 people on my team. And I think that basic concept stuck with me for the next 30 plus years I was in a leadership role. Even at the end, when I had several thousand employees, that basic premise was what stuck with me the whole way, And as John said, it's a different job, really, It's and I know when I was first in the company, I thought it was some kind of natural progression. It was the way in which you would grow in your career over time, and even in those days. But over time, Boeing and probably many companies have a really, you can really take a technical career path and you can become, we call them fellowship, tech fellows, and so on that are industry experts. So that's really a very rewarding career path. We need that. Or you can take a leadership career path, which is the direction I went. And, like I said, I just like the idea of creating an environment where people can thrive every day. And I think if you were to put it in one line, what's the job of the leader? To create an environment where people can thrive at work and be the best version of themselves. And when they do that, then they're going to take good care of the customer they have inside the company, or ultimately our final customer. So that requires a different set of skills than what we learned in our undergraduate engineering degrees. And, I've had the great fortune of working with some alumni of the ETM program during my career. And I'm very impressed, how well prepared they are, because our world has gotten more complex, so project management, that those skills are like critical skills now compared to even, earlier in my career, managing risk, financial acumen, like my undergraduate degree. I took one engineering economics class, which was like a business case analysis type material, not really understanding how to read a balance sheet and so on. And now with this program, you learn that, you learn how it connects to business and so on. So I'm really impressed with it. The other thing that I was wondering about at the time when I went into management, is this something you have to be born with? A propensity to take care of people, or can you learn this? And I'm happy to report that it's a skill that you can learn and practice. And I've seen people across the spectrum, some naturally maybe better with people, some not so much, but everyone can learn this, and you can develop this skill and you can be successful irregardless of where you start from. Maybe where you are in your career, some of the things that were on my mind at the time was, I'm going to step away from this everyday engineering work. I'll still be connected to it, but I won't be like doing it, which means my skills are going to not, be as sharp over time as they were, because I'm just not doing it day in, day out. And to be honest, that caused me a little bit of an identity crisis. It's like, oh, I've put a lot of work in. Am I okay with that? Um, and I rationalized, yes, I am, because it's my job now to help those that have chosen that career path to really be sharp, and I can make a bigger difference doing that. I think a leader has to learn to delegate, and that's a tough one, because especially if you're technically oriented, you've got some pretty strong ideas on how stuff ought to get done. And I think delegation is something, it's a skill to develop. I've learned that there's like 10 ways to do anything. There's the way you would do it, and there's at least 9 other ways or more that are just as good, and you kind of have to get over just doing it your way. So just a few things to contemplate. Finally, I'll just wrap up. I think it's really important when you become a leader, maybe everyday life too, but to know yourself well. How are you put together? What's your stressors? How do you react under stress? Get some good self-awareness of that so you can, be aware of it. If you react in certain ways that aren't helpful, you can be aware of that and you can do something about it. Really know your team. Each person is an individual. They're complex. You need to know them individually. They're not just some cog in a gear train. And then knowing what the company needs, so you can take action and you can, drive forward. So just a few things to get started thinking about, when you're trying to make this choice. So, Kay, I'll wrap up that here and pass it to Jen.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that story. Very, very insightful. And Jen.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Bachman and Dr. Jones, for inviting me here today. I am just thrilled to see all the participants from around the world. I do want to mention, I was witness to John Pricco and Dave Hyam and their amazing careers. I will tell you stories where I was always in awe of John, his exemplary engineering and leadership reputation just spanned the entire company. And Dave had a reputation for being a big thinker. And we've had the privilege of working with each other now for probably 30 years, right, Dave? And Dave's currently a chairperson for the board of the Oregon Manufacturing Innovation Center. And so our journeys together, the world is a small place. I'm thrilled to be here today. I'd like to just start with my unusual story. I'm a proud alum of Washington State University. I attended Pullman in the 80s. And just to say, I was also a resident advisor in our dorms for 3 years. I served as an assistant hall director. And I happened to squeeze in a semester being a TA in one of the chemistry labs at Fulmer Hall. So somehow I've had many opportunities to show up as a cougar in many different ways. And so today, mastering the transition from technical to leadership is also sort of a broader way of expressing change management throughout our journeys, right? And being our authentic selves, which really means, building on our strengths and our passion. And so in my 34 plus year career, what's been core to my journey is this notion that people matter. And so in this transition, people matter, and building trust based on character and competency has been just a core belief of mine, where, as leaders, we extend respect to all people, and that we lead with transparency and truth based on data and analytics. As technical people, that's what we do, right? And so early on, I learned that we need to demonstrate courage. We need to demonstrate technical competency. And my background is so different in that I was not a trained engineer at Washington State University. I spent my summer years at Boeing on the factory floor and in the field. And I was fortunate enough to spend that time while going to school. And so I learned to tailor my learning and degree program to study what I wanted to do, which was initially pre-med and chemistry. I pivoted to a physical sciences chemistry background with a focus on the environment. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you is because back in the analog days, which is where I came from, the early version of sustainability was really restoration and compliance. And so my curricula at Washington State University was focused in that. And so by the time I graduated with a diploma in hand, I also had an offer to join the Boeing company. And my first job title was facilities engineer. So technical first, just to share with you what it's like to start on the ground. I worked sampling transformers, for example, looking for PCBs in oil. I got my hands all dirty, sampling sanitary sewers and storm sewers, looking for total toxic organics and measuring turbidity, and which led me to actually helping to design and build one of the first certified environmental labs in the state of Washington, certified by the Department of Ecology. In the day, I was on the hazmat team for 12 years, responding to bomb squad explosive real world issues. And so, in that time, short period of time, I also started my leadership journey. And so one of my first messages is I don't think it's too early to start. I was 25 when I first landed my management job at Boeing. And maybe unlike John and Dave, I wasn't tapped on the shoulder and given an assignment. I had to write an essay and face a panel of 6 interviewers, and make my way to, essentially competing for my first leadership role. And from there, like Dave said, I started with 12 people on my team, and it went from 50 to 150 to 19,000 people around the world, and eventually, from a functional excellence standpoint, responsible for thousands more around the world. As the executive vice president, officially one of the officers of the Boeing company, you sort of know that you're on that level of leadership when your face is now on the annual report of the Boeing company. And so my journey was full of challenges. I'll just say that I found myself in places where I was the first female, the first person from an ethnic background, but wherever I went, back to the tenets of people matter, building trust, was, an essential ingredient to leadership at the Boeing company, listening to people, where most of my teams, honestly, I love to say this, they were Harley driving machinists around the world. And, I was just privileged to be in situations where I got to lead. And, with that, I'll just pause and say that leadership is something that you choose to do. I'll also distinguish that leadership is not administration, it's not management, it's actually knowing that the sum of the whole is greater than just the parts, and build on your strengths, know your purpose, and be passionate about leadership, because people are watching you and they want to follow you, but you've got to inspire them towards a future vision.
Wow.
Over to you, Kay.
What an amazing story. That was great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Actually, thank you all. Thank you, John, Dave, and Jen. And now, folks, joining us here today, this is your chance to ask in the chat any questions that you might have. And I'm going to start us off. How's that sound? So this is a question. This might kind of key up some other questions from our audience. This is for all three of you, John, Dave, and Jen. If someone is in a technical role today and wants to position themselves for leadership, I know some of you covered this a little bit, but what more advice would you give them if someone's interested going into a leadership role? John, you want to start us off?
Sure.
What do you think?
Sure.
What's a piece of advice?
Yeah, I shared some of that with, how you might prepare. And I guess what I'll add to that is you need to be seen. Now, don't take that the wrong way. You don't want to be seen as that person that's always trying to shove their face in front of what's going on and jump in the middle of things. People need to be aware of who you are and what you do, right? And so you do that through your performance. And like I talked about, when you're thinking about your customers, your suppliers, your peers, and your boss, for example, think about what their job is. Think about what your customers and suppliers' jobs are, and then in how you act every day and the things you pay attention to, try to address some of that stuff, right? So that you're not just thinking about your little knothole and what's going on. People will see that you have that bigger picture. And I'll just add one more little thing that's related to this. And it's a little bit about leadership too, but I call it the 3/3 approach. So as leaders, you spend maybe a third of your time making sure the work gets done, turning the crank, are we measuring the right things? A third of the time focusing on people. Are you mentoring people? Are you helping them learn and grow? And a third of the time on strategy and improvement. And you can really lead from any position you're in. You don't have to be in a management role. There's all kinds of opportunities to pay attention to those kind of things. So if people see you not just thinking about the work, but thinking about others and how they contribute and how they interact, and thinking about strategy and paying attention to that kind of stuff and improvement, that's going to put you on the map and you'll be seen in that aspect.
Okay, great. I'm going to jump back over to the questions that we have coming into the chat. And this one, I'm going to actually direct it to Dave. Dave Gordon is asking, don't we think leaders from an engineering background alone may not be able to effectively delegate tasks and empower their team? It's kind of two-parted here. Is this because they may focus more on their technical details than the management side? What's your thoughts, Dave?
Yeah, thanks, Gordon and Kay, I'd say that's definitely an area to, I don't know that it is exclusive to a previous engineer. I think anyone that's been doing something and now is going to take a leadership role, I've watched this, can struggle to delegate what they previously did, themselves, especially if they're in a domain that they really have deep knowledge, So I think it's a skill to learn, and it's important that you kind of understand yourself. I mentioned that in my opening comments. Are you a type of person that really wants to have hands-on in the middle of the solution? If so, you need to temper that a bit, and kind of just stay quiet and allow the team really to pick a solution. And then in your mind, you can go, well, is this going to work? It may not be how I do it. Is it good? And you just practice that and you get more comfortable with that over time. It's a new skill to learn. And you learn by doing. Maybe you're not great initially, but through practice, you get better and better, And there's ways in which to expand your knowledge by doing it, by going to ETM program, for example, maybe engineers have a bigger tendency to do this because we're pretty technical people to begin with. But I think understanding yourself is important, And as I was coming up to this sort of fork in the road for myself, I realized, I'd become like a lead engineer and so on. And I came to the conclusion that in order to be a better leader, I need to have a broader understanding of how the company works. So I became very interested and I let my manager know this, I want to learn as much as I can. And as John said, you need to have some self-advocacy for your career. I think it's hard to define that distinctly, how much is enough and or too much or not enough. For me, it was just letting my manager know, gee, I'm really keen to do more, learn more. And so I figured, what I found to be kind of the recipe for success that helped me and advice I give others was, whatever job you're in, do the best you can, give it your all. Be flexible, so when they come to you and say, hey, like this happened to me a lot. Hey, Dave, we got this special assignment. Could you go do it? And you right away bump into your comfort zone. It's like, geez, am I going to be able to figure this out? I had the courage to kind of just get uncomfortable, and the cool thing about that is that will become your new kind of comfort zone. You kind of raise the bar, but there's a little bit of pain and suffering that goes with that, but you have to sort of just accept that. And then the last thing was to be a good teammate, be reliable, be someone that, gets along well and does what the group needs and so on and so forth, But these are all skills that we learn when we transition into a leadership role. At least for me, my undergraduate engineering degree didn't give me that. I learned that as I went, and programs like this and other, MBA programs are nice sort of accelerators to that, which is really good to have. So anyway, just a few of my thoughts.
Great, great. Jen, I'm going to follow up with another question that's coming from the chat. And, at the beginning, when you're in that technical role, we are really focused on improving those technical skills. But Jen, can you talk a little bit about, the soft skills and how important that's going to be for moving into the management position?
Yeah, I've heard this saying where the soft skills are actually the harder skills to really learn and to be authentic with. It certainly is a necessary component to leadership. So I'll just say at the beginning of my career, when I started full-time at Boeing, I did begin my MBA program almost immediately. So the notion of full-time work and part-time education at the beginning of your career is what I did to supplement what I considered to be my blind spots, which were around business and just leadership in general, organizational development. And these were things that I was genuinely interested in learning. I will say I also, through that program, then learned about systems thinking. And I really think that stayed with me throughout my entire journey. I think some of you may know Peter Senge's book on the fifth discipline about learning organizations and personal mastery. These are concepts that, it's easy to learn in a book, but then to actually apply and to learn by experience is something that helps with the soft skills, expand your knowledge. It's also easy to be very focused in your particular company, your particular business. I would say as you progress in your leadership journey, look up and out, understand your industry as a whole, understand what the best practices are, who's best in industry, because while it's okay to aspire to be better every day, your team wants to be better every day, but all of you together want to be best in what you do. And how do you know what best is? You just have to always connect the dots to the context that you're operating in, the industry. It's local, it's global, balancing that notion of focusing on yourself, your team, but yet understanding what's going on around you. Connect all those dots.
Okay, really, really good. We've got some great questions coming in here. There's one here that I wanted to ask you, and someone is asking that they're with a company that is not actively growing, so not many promotions. How can you position yourself for the next move? What's your advice there?
Yeah,
I guess I'll go
uh,
ahead, Dave.
I was just going to say, I think I can relate to this. During my career, there were moments in my career where the opportunities for promotion sort of flatlined, I guess, for a while. We kind of went through various levels of growth, and there was a stretch where the company just wasn't growing. I'm thinking of the period right after the 9/11 incident in aerospace. Anyway, it really slowed things down. So I was, thinking to myself, I wonder, like, will I ever have another opportunity? And or is this kind of where I'm at, And I had to kind of think through, like, am I okay with that, And the short answer is, I'm okay with it. I can still learn a lot. I can still, I would talk about um, what I call horizontal moves throughout the organization at the level I was at. Not all learning needs to come from a promotion, So I had a lot of moves horizontally within the level I was at, different businesses, different functions, and my learning vector continued, to go at the pace that made me feel good about what I was doing and that I was, really doing meaningful work, even though promotions probably are on hold for the next few years or are going to be slow, and I just had confidence that our company will come back stronger. And as I learn more through these horizontal moves that I focused on, I'll even be more ready, when the time comes. So I think everyone's career probably experiences that, where you have growth and then maybe a plateau for a while, then some growth. It's varies for everyone, but I think it's common to hit a stretch where it's like, okay, what might be next? And I felt that by just moving around horizontally a lot in my career.
Okay, great, great. Here's another. What's the best way for data teams to present insights to executives in a compelling way?
Well, I'll answer that. I'm a visual person, an experiential leader. I think that um, what's compelling is, does the data turn into insights and information that you can take action on? And that would, improve your team, your workspace. There are a lot of visual tools out there now. I was an early adopter of digital, but again, born in the analog days. So my very first computer was an 8086. And I learned how to use stick people and PowerPoint probably before everybody did. So the visual component of data and insights is a really important, way to communicate. And in terms of access to executives, you know, um, I I think the networking skill is an important component of what leaders need to be doing for themselves and their teams. And relationships are built not just in a transactional way, but over a long term. And so, that opens doors by just knowing who your network and really um, authentically, nurturing your network.
Good. John or Dave, do you have anything to add to that?
I'll just add a little bit. I think it's important, especially if the people you're presenting the data to maybe not be as technically savvy as those that develop that data. It's very important, and Jen touched on this, is what's the message you're trying to get across? What's the actionable message you're trying to get across? And then it's supported by that data that you've spent so much time putting together. but it's really about what's that key message? What action are you asking for, or what issue to be addressed, or what opportunity to take advantage of?
Okay, great. I'm going to jump back. We've got a person that is potentially in the situation where they would transfer from senior engineer to managing their peers. Yesterday, they had an interview for an engineering manager spot in the current work group. Any advice for this person?
I can offer some advice. It's a manager of your current work group. That's what I did, my first management job. And it's an eye-opening experience. So you have peers in the group, and now all of a sudden you're their manager. And I think a couple things. We talked about delegation. That was kind of a hard lesson for me to learn. So I would get requests from my manager to review something. They wanted information on something, and I was working so hard and long hours, and I finally realized, well, maybe I should ask somebody in the group to do this. And so I had to learn by doing on delegation, and I started delegating things, and I got them done. It's like, wow, this really works, you know. So it's really and some of the people in the group were my friends also. So acknowledging that you still have relationships with people, but also acknowledging that there's that boss-employee relationship and the respect that goes with that, and just being open about that, especially if there are other people in the group that also were vying for that job and didn't get it. Sit down with them individually, have that conversation that says, I know you wanted this job also. You're a valuable member of this team. They asked me to do it. I'm here to help, and I need your help in helping us succeed. And just have that open conversation. Don't ignore the elephant in the room.
Can I add to that, Kay?
Sure.
So I think an important part of delegation is clear expectations, the clarity of expectations. What is it that you're trying to accomplish together? And as leaders, it's really important to not just, ask people to do things, but you've got to be able to role model it yourself. You've got to teach it, also measure progress, so that as a leader, my first leader role, I was 25, everybody was twice my age, at the time, that, being respectful, focused on, the data, the words that matter, being able to measure it so that intermittently you could speak to each other very directly around progress being made. So, clarity of expectations, teach it, role model it, measure it.
Dave, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I had the same experience as John, and I think it's a tough one, because you're coming into the role with some previous relationships as a peer, and I just think being open and transparent about that. I can remember my first day now with this group who the Friday before were just my peers, and I talked to them about kind of the story I've told here. Why did I want to do this, and I kind of gave them, well, it gives me joy to make it possible for you all to succeed. And I gave them my little story, which I've since then told 1,000 times, I think, at least, So, and then I wanted to make sure that I cared about them each individually, so like John described, I would sit down with each person trying to understand what they hope to gain, what's their hopes and dreams, and then become very active in helping them achieve that. Starting, some of our earlier discussions, starting to step away and not get so concerned about whether they're doing something different than I would do it. I started my journey of understanding myself and so on. But I think initially, if you just are open and transparent and honest, that's the best way to start, and by doing that, showing a little vulnerability, like, gee, I don't know, people will lean in, I think, and they'll want to help you be successful. So I guess I enter every job that way, be humble, have some vulnerability. Gee, I'm here to learn from you. And I find that people will lean towards you to help you. been in jobs where I don't have the domain knowledge and I'm learning as I go. And I think that's just always a good way to start into a new role.
Good, good. All right, here's another one. We've talked here today about the idea there's multiple ways to really approach a task or a situation. How do each of you, or how would each of you encourage team members to think differently, to explore different perspectives, but yet maintain a cohesive team dynamic?
I'll go ahead and start.
Okay.
I think being open and honest that you want their hearts and minds, not just their hands, to get the work done, so that we're only as good as what all of us can come through together with. And we all bring different perspectives and different ideas. And to really encourage that, and Dave mentioned it earlier, there's a time to just sit there quietly and let the team start to interact. And you do that not by making statements, but asking questions. So if, let's say, you have your group together and there's a problem you're trying to address, as the manager, if you say, I think X, Y, Z, everybody's going to shut down. They're going to go, oh, John knows what he wants to do. Ask questions and then sit down and try very hard to just keep your mouth shut and listen. And ask people, especially if somebody's quiet, what do you think? What are some other aspects that can come to the table here? And so that kind of approach of really being interactive, involve your team, let them know that you can't solve this stuff together. Let's look at all the different possibilities, even brainstorm a list of different ways to do things, and then go from there on kind of narrowing that down and deciding what to do.
Okay, great. I'm moving on here, and this is for, I'm gonna ask Jen to start us off with answering this one. All of you have had long careers at Boeing. How do you avoid becoming jaded and always bringing your best self to work? Jen, can you start us off on that?
Yeah, I think it comes to this notion of personal accountability, and the idea that as a leader, so many people are watching you, they're counting on you. And it's not to say that, you don't go to work in an authentic manner, but as a leader, you have to accept some responsibility for setting the tone. And while the world around us is challenging, you've all heard that it's a volatile, uncertain world, with a bit more chaos nowadays. A leader has to be able to acknowledge the space that you're in, but also, with the context of the mission at hand, asking everyone to be involved. And I love John's version of, the hearts and minds need to be aligned around what is the purpose of the team, and, maintain a positive workspace, but acknowledge the real challenges that people have, and then help each other out.
Great. Dave, how do you continue to bring your best self to work each day?
Yeah, I guess I felt it was, I can tell you, I look forward to coming to work every day for 36 years. And I would hope that most people in their careers can have that experience. There are moments, every job has that. But I was eager to come to work every day because I got to work with brilliant people, doing things that were really important, I felt. And even when it was tough times, what I've learned, I was put into some assignments that, gee, we're in real trouble here. How are we going to get through this? And one of the things I learned about human nature, I think if you can create this environment where it's us working against the problem versus us against each other for why are we here? How did we get here? All of that. I think you get at that through absorbing and learning the challenges the team is facing, and then become kind of, you're on their side of the table, like, okay, can we try this? What can we do? I made it okay not to know all the answers in the beginning. It's like, okay, well, we know where we need to be and we know where we are. We can't necessarily define succinctly every step, but we can design the first couple. Like we know we can do at least these couple things, and have faith that when we do that, the next few things will illuminate themselves. And it's okay not to know today. I would make that okay. And in doing that, it created an environment where it felt like a game to us, like we can win, and it drew us together. And in some sort of strange way, we had fun doing what was a really hard thing, versus the, I've been in teams too where it was more like, oh, it's your fault, and that sucks the life out of you. So I tried to make it um, such that we're all on the same team and we're going to try and solve this, and I think that's a leadership skill that we can develop and really help our teams succeed, kind of back to getting an environment where people can thrive.
Okay, John, I'm going to let you wrap us up in just a few seconds. How do you bring your best self to work every day during that long, wonderful career you had?
Yeah, I think Jen and Dave had some great points. And I'm going to look at it more from an emotional standpoint for the individual. You had a couple tough days at work. You're getting up in the morning. I got to go back in there. How do you not be jaded? First of all, like Dave, I can count on less than one hand the number of times that I woke up and thought, oh, I don't want to go to work today because of the work, right? Because something challenging. I loved my job. I think recognizing that you have a role to play and getting your mindset such that I can only do something about the things that me and my team, if you're in a leadership role, have some control over. And this is kind of what Dave touched on. Let's put our heads together and figure out what we can do. And then at the end of the day, when you get home and you're brushing your teeth before you go to bed, and you can look yourself in the mirror, and if you can say, despite how the day went, good, bad, or ugly, I did everything I could with the information I had at the time to do the best job I could. Tomorrow I get another chance to go do this again. That helped me sleep better at night. And then the other thing for me, exercise. Huge difference in being able to handle stress and keeping my attitude good. And focus on the people. They're the ones that make a difference. And that can help build that camaraderie and help you want to come into work every day and have fun with that team and get some stuff done.
That's great. That's great. All right, that wraps up our session today. And what a fantastic discussion. Thanks to everyone for your thoughtful questions today. And thank you to our incredible panelists, John, Dave, and Jen. Thank you for sharing all your insight and experiences. It was such a valuable discussion. Hey, if your question wasn't answered here today, please look for a survey in your email and we will post the responses on our LinkedIn page. If you would like more information on the METM program, you can join us live this evening at 6 p.m. Pacific. I hope to see you there. I'll be hosting an informational session that will take a deep dive into our program. We'll talk about our certificates, the application process, and even the cost. So thank you. Thank you, everyone. Would you please, before you leave, please turn on your cameras. Everyone, turn on your cameras. If you've got them, use them. Join me in thanking our panelists today. And thank you, audience, for your great questions, your participation today. Stay tuned to our LinkedIn page for future seminars and events. And go Cougs.
Go Cougs.
Go Cougs. It
Go
was our pleasure.
Cougs.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.